Hey guys, welcome to Kumamoto, Japan. This is home to Honda's manufacturing plant where they build all their motorcycles and also do all their testing. I mean, going back to the 80s, the heyday of HRC, this track right here is where a lot of that testing went down. So really hallowed grounds and really cool to be able to go in and see some of the HRC plant, see some of the manufacturing. They let us watch the assembly line. They took us into places they said no motorcycle media has ever been. They had it pretty barricaded off. They were making sure we didn't see anything we weren't supposed to, but still pretty cool for them to allow us to go in and have a peek at something they're very, very protective over. So we got a chance to ride today the 2027 prototype. This is what they call the P2. This goes through multiple iterations, sort of a directional bike, kind of a Frankenstein of a bunch of parts. Then that goes to a prototype. Then that goes to a pre-production, and that is even split into P1, P2 before we actually go to a bike that comes off the assembly line, a full production model. So they wanted to preface everything with that this is not a production model, but this is what the production model will be based off of, obviously. So it's very close. We're hoping that it's the same, but they wanted to make sure we were giving that preface up front. I'm still not able to ride, so I had our test rider, Joey King, jump on, as well as Trey Kennard and a lot of the other guys here. We're kind of all sharing feedback because this isn't an official test or review. It's sort of a general impression. The wording's very specific from Japan and what they wanted. But anyway, just looking at this thing, and we'll go over everything that's new on it. It's very cool looking. The guys in MXGP are racing it this year, so keep an eye on how that's going because so far Hurlings and Vial and Ruben have been kind of crushing it. When you hear a little bit more about what they did to this bike, you can understand why. So let's cover what's new. It's a 9.9 pound weight reduction, which is crazy. Curb weight's 238 pounds, without fuel 226, and 6 of those pounds come out of the engine alone, which is crazy. And as you start to see some of the parts and components, they just shrunk everything up. It was like they took the cases and shrink wrapped it. Everything just kind of sucked in real tight. But even a lot of the internals, they figured out a way to make them just as durable, still function, but be like half the size. It's crazy. Revised base geometry and rider position. The wheelbase is now 58.7 inches, which is 0.3 inches longer than before. And the rear axles moved upward by 0.5 inches. So that also changes the rake 0.2 degrees to 27.5 degrees. I know it's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but if you're into that kind of stuff. Brand new 6-pound lighter engine with more power across the rev range and 17mm narrow width. More narrow just generally, but also for a longer span of the bike forward to back, which is really cool. One of the highlights about this engine is, if you go back to 17, Honda got a lot of complaints that the bike was too powerful, too abrupt, too difficult to ride. So they were actually using that power plant and a lot of those components to check against this one because they had to meet the new sound requirements, which are FIM based, but they're bringing them to AMA in 2027. So this meets those, and they were able to meet noise levels, which typically takes horsepower way down, but they actually increased horsepower across the entire range and torque. Pretty impressive. To do that, that's a huge step. And I think by having that previous engine that was so powerful, they kind of went back and said, okay, well, let's have a look at some of the things that were making that so powerful. We can apply those to this bike with the sound, try to use mapping to sort of make it more tractable, and boom, this is what we got. So all new bodywork, which obviously matches the works bike used over in MXGP. They call it the tricolor livery, and I think you're gonna see that across all of Honda's racing brands, whether it's road racing, moto, off-road, whatever. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but the factory teams always had to use custom carbon tanks or something bigger because the standard tanks would not last an entire moto. They bumped up the size this year from 1.7 to 1.9 gallons. Doesn't seem like a ton, but that will get them through a moto. And that's great for off-road too. So, or if you're somebody that likes to ride a long time. Sustainable materials used for some of the parts, including the front fender, front number plate, side panels, and seat base. So they take old scrap plastic, melt them down, and they're reusing them. All the tree huggers will be psyched. The new engine with more rigid crankshaft assembly, new bearings, and the crank web was changed from an anchor profile to round. So pretty cool when you look at the crank. It used to just look sort of like an anchor, I guess, exactly what they call it. So now there's it's like a complete wheel around the outside edge. Less vibration, more rigidity, balance they were talking about. So a lot of engineering, propeller head stuff, but it was significant improvements for them. The bore and stroke changed, optimized the shape of the combustion chamber and piston crown, fully transistorized ignition and ignition coil with updated fuel injection and ignition settings, obviously, to account for new engine parts and exhaust and everything else. New airbox, air filter, and air funnel. And this was actually pretty cool. They showed us kind of the flow bench that they used. Again, and they went back to that 2017 model and compared it and got this one to flow way better. With flow, with more horsepower, with higher RPMs, you get more sound. So it's like you're trying to build horsepower without letting the revs get too high to try to keep the sound down. It's a delicate dance. And those guys were kind of taking us through some of the airflow stuff they were doing to achieve that. And it's pretty neat. A little bit easier now to get in and change the filter. I think people are going to like it. Although if you've got old filters, they're not going to work anymore, all new. Evolved Unicam valve train system that's lighter and more compact. larger intake and exhaust valves that are titanium now, more aggressive cam profile, steeper angle for all valves, and shorter, steeper downdraft intake. New clutch with lighter design and innovative back torque limiter design. So it's got like these rubber cushions inside of it. It's all hydraulic function, but it's got these rubber blocks inside that almost act like a slipper clutch that sort of give you a little more feel, so it's not so on-off. We use these actually in Supermoto, something very similar, but this only applies one direction, only in braking, not accelerating. And they do that with the shape of it in the basket. It's really cool. They walked us all through it. Very neat design. Redesigned, lighter, more reliable starter system. And a big change on this motorcycle is the transmission. Completely redesigned, smaller and lighter, and has revised taller gear ratios. So every single gear, I think, except for fifth, is taller. You're gonna notice this on starts. You're gonna notice it corner to corner, where maybe before you had to grab a gear, but then downshift again right away. Now you can just let it run. It pulls way longer. To me, maybe just talking to guys, it was the most noticeable change. That's a big deal. New exhaust system to meet the decibels, new main wiring harness, new design for mainframe and rear subframe. That was taken from the race team. The US race team in 26 was welding on these kind of tabs up near the head tube in 3 different places. And they basically just took those rigidity numbers and built them into a manufactured frame. So that's what you really want to see, is the race team stuff that they figure out jumping its way into production. It happens, typically it takes a long time. So to see it go from one year to the next is pretty impressive. Also has a new swing arm, chain slider, and plastic chain guide plate. Swing arm is roughly 1.1 pounds lighter and has a D-shaped cross section rather than a more boxy traditional swing arm frame design. What they were trying to do with that frame too, about 70% of the main frame's components are new, while longitudinal and torsional rigidity is increased about 10% without increasing weight. We had a long chat with them about frame rigidity, and sometimes the old bike, people would say it felt harsh, and you think, oh, they need to soften the frame, but it actually works in the opposite. A lot of times when a frame will flex, it gets to a point and then stops, and that's that harsh feel that you get. So by adding some rigidity, and there's torsional, there's lateral, there's longitudinal, again, a bunch of propeller heads using all kinds of CAD design to determine where to make it stiffer or softer to flex in the right ways. But it's a science. Really cool to watch them work. Suspension has changed internals and oil setting with extensive steps taken to optimize damping feel and consistency, including between the front and the rear. They've got a new rear shock design and fork design that keeps it from pitching so much. So when you get on the brakes, the front end doesn't want to dive, and when you accelerate, it's not squatting down so far. That pitching upsets chassis, makes it harder to settle into turns. So this just quiets the whole bike down. Yeah, it went from a bending control valve to a dynamic blow system, main piston valve structure. So that's a fancy way to say that keeps that hold up when you want it, keeps it from squatting and pitching forward and back too much. Kashima coating added on internal suspension parts, front and rear, which is pretty cool because typically they add Kashima where you see it. I don't want to say it's just for looks, but you kind of go, ooh, you know, this is coated, that's cool. If they're actually doing it inside, that's strictly performance, right? Because you're not going to see it. Stiffer front suspension springs. Spring rate was increased from 5 to 5.2 Newton meters. New shock linkage with revised ratio and a new thrust needle bearing, new wheel hub design. The hub actually has a broader pattern, so the sprocket is a little lighter, but it's actually stronger. And they went from Sunstar to RK, I believe. So that's a switch there. MX-34 Dunlop tires. And then a bunch of detail, which I love this, they went to a lot of effort to make it easier to work on. Before, trying to get the shock off used to be a little bit of a chore. Now that pops out no problem. So just a lot of cool stuff. And then obviously for the HRC Works Edition, you get the graphics, seat cover, twin air filter, Yosh exhaust system with a titanium header this year, DID gold chain, black rims, Renthal G165 grips, black triple clamps, metallic red cylinder head cover, hand finished intake port, HRC Works Edition, laser stamped on the cylinder head, among other things. So it's got its own suspension settings, really cool hand adjusters for the fork, so you can adjust those on the fly. I wish those would make their way to production. They're so nice. Black anodized front axle holders, the titanium coated 18-inch shock shaft, metallic red shock spring, dedicated ECU mapping, all kinds of cool stuff. They got rid of the skid plate that just comes on the X now, but it will mount right to your R. If you like it, you want to have one on your bike, you can just buy one that they sell for the X model. It goes right on. A lot of thought went into that. So what did these guys think of this motorcycle? I talked to Joe extensively when he got off the bike, rode it several times today. Really, it was a little tough in the morning because all these guys, it was sloppy mud, so a little tough to test and feel. The things we got back were definitely that transmission, the lengthened gears, which This is something every race team does, Supercross or motocross. By extending out those gear ratios, it lets you not shift so much, makes it easier to ride. Those times when, like I said, you're running out and you're just on the limiter and you're like, I don't want to shift, or you shift and then shift right back down, that's gone. It is so much more convenient and so much more comfortable to ride just because of the transmission. That was a huge point of talking when we got done. Guys, we're talking about suspension being very balanced and that lack of pitch and throw when you brake and accelerate, noticeable by most folks. Very comfortable bike. Honda always is. They've always had a really nice rider triangle. Sounds like this is no different. Differences between the R and the Works Edition. Obviously, the main thing you notice is the power. When you go to map 3, which is aggressive, the HRC model is a handful. These guys were all going, that's too much for them, you know, a lot of the test riders. Trey Kennard said he wanted to really make that difference between the standard map and the aggressive map noticeable. The soft map is just a touch softer than standard, but to go from standard to aggressive is a big jump, and guys were noticing it. But great traction, great feel, a really smooth power. So it's there, but it delivers really nicely. And a lot of that is just getting the mapping to work with all the new components and really getting it to deliver in a way that allows you to use it and get it to the ground, right? It comes on too strong, you're just gonna break the wheel loose. I think that's kind of what happened in 2017. It had a lot of power, but if you deliver it softly and smoothly, you can use it. If it comes on a little too strong, you just get yourself in trouble. So those are a lot of the major updates and kind of feedback that guys were giving. We're gonna have a regular proper introduction where they will have a 26 and the 2, the R and the HRC Works Edition model. Later this, probably this summer in the US, where we'll be able to get a little bit more detail on what we thought. We just wanted to kind of give you here's what's new, here's kind of an initial impression. And you know, something they mentioned was that they felt like they did on the 26, it did kind of run out of power up top. They fixed that. And I think that's been confirmed by all the riders here today. That isn't an issue anymore. They had some harsh spots in that chassis and suspension. That's fixed. And they had a little bit too much movement in the chassis forward to back. That's fixed. And everybody kind of confirmed that today, that those changes worked. There's so many new things to this bike. We'll try to do a breakdown on the bike itself again when we do the introduction and really go into detail about it. But for now, that's what we got. Huge thank you to the folks here, Ryan Dudek and the US media team, Bradley, but also all the folks here in Japan. Just super, super welcoming. Ate some really weird food. My stomach's probably gonna be upset for a while. I turned down the horse meat, but everybody else partook, and I've still got bubble guts. So we'll work that out, but it was a blast. Thank you so much to everybody over here. Just an absolute great time, super fun. Thank you so much. Guys, hope you enjoyed. We'll see you at the official launch coming up this summer.
If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, comment what you thought, and share it with your friends.